I'd like to thank San Jose State University School of Information for hosting this great conference, and welcome everyone to Libraries in Virtual Reality Environments. I'm Valerie Hill, also known as Librarian in virtual spaces. I'm the director of the Community Virtual Library, and my background includes teaching at all grade levels, serving as a school librarian for 20 years, and then teaching library and information science after I earned my PhD at Texas Women's University in 2012. So for the past 15 years, I've been researching changing literacy and changing librarianship with a focus on virtual environments. I hope to save some time for questions at the end, either in text or in voice with a raised hand, and Vicky's going to help with those questions. So first, I want us to think for a minute about libraries and how they've changed. I recently led a discussion group about the future of libraries, and many people at that discussion group shared memories of libraries when they were growing up. In their youth, story times, wandering the stacks in awe, meeting friends to study in the library, a physical place that many people found inspirational. In the past, we thought of the library as this place filled with books. And so I looked at a recent definition on a site called Librarianship Studies website. And here's their definition. A library is a collection of sources of information and similar resources made accessible to a defined community for reference or borrowing. It provides physical or digital access to material and may be a physical building or room or a virtual space or both. Think about libraries that you've encountered in your past as we envision what the library is today and in the future, because the pandemic closed so many physical libraries. And today we'll think about how libraries are no longer always brick and mortar. And many of you have probably heard of the library as the third place, because everyone needs a home and a workplace, and then a hub, a community hub for sharing stories, sharing ideas, and the library has definitely served as the third place for communities for many, many years. But it's not just books anymore, as we all know, as librarians. I loved this phrase, the Gutenberg parentheses. They have closed. If you haven't heard of the term, just think about how the Gutenberg press brought books to the masses around the year 1500. And for 500 years, that format, the printed format, the book was king of the information hierarchy. But that has ended. And here's a print from the Gutenberg Bible around 1455. Now, centuries later, most content is born digital. So that period, those parentheses have closed. And Professor Lars Sauerberg is the one who coined that term. You can look that up later if you find it interesting. We don't any longer rely on print materials today. Many people access the library on their digital devices, as you know. We carry the library in our pockets. But is the content in libraries, the information itself, is that all we really need? Or is the library as a place still relevant? I believe personally that it's essential for human beings to come together in a shared space. We don't learn in isolation. And Vygotsky, our famous Russian child development psychologist, he said that we learn in collision with other people's ideas. So we need to be with other people to actually learn. So if the Gutenberg parentheses have closed and we get everything online, the internet has really changed our life in many ways. And I really like this quote. You're probably familiar with it. The internet is the world's largest library. It's just that all the books are on the floor. There isn't any cataloging system. You just get whatever you type in. You get different hits every time. And we all know that. It's just a sea of chaos. That's John Allen Paulos. He's a professor. The information age brings information right to our fingertips. In fact, we're drowning in it, We don't really need more and more and more information. We need ways to seek wisdom together through collaboration, through dialogue, and through critical thinking. Librarians have always known that when we teach information skills. But can this be done virtually? Many people have struggled with trying to figure out how to teach online, virtually, digitally during the pandemic. But many online spaces can really feel empty and isolated. Rather than bringing us close together, we get that sense that we're not really together. I recently began intrigued by something called Dunbars Number. It's a theoretical limit to the number of people with whom any individual is able to sustain a stable or meaningful relationship, social relationship. And this number is usually considered to be roughly 150 people. And that's Robin Dunbar. If that's true, social media is blowing our minds. We can't keep up with all of the people that we're calling so-called friends. So how to have meaningful learning relationships, that's a problem we need to consider in the future. Social media brings people together across the globe, but it does create problems because we can't possibly have meaningful relationships with thousands of people. So most online platforms don't allow us to be in a real place together with a sense of presence of being together. In fact, right here in Zoom, it's a great platform, but I don't really feel like I'm in a shared space with each one of you. It's a great opportunity for me to share meaningful content, but we're separated and I feel like I'm looking through a screen at you, or you're looking through one at me. Virtual reality has potential. It has potential for sharing virtual space together. And I've been exploring VR for over a decade. Currently, there are two types, and I've made this chart to kind of distinguish the two. VR with a headset, which I have, and VR on a desktop, where you're looking at your screen and your head is separate from that space. And both have purposes and potential. You can enter and you can view a simulated environment, either in the first person view, which is sort of like a mouse look, most people would call it, or in a third person view where you have an avatar and you see your avatar in that virtual space. So most virtual reality headsets, they're in the first person view. You do not see yourself, you're just in the environment. And there's purposes and potential for both of those. VR headsets are really becoming available for mainstream as the cost comes down. And there are many educators that are exploring them. There are lots of educators in VR groups. I've done presentations for VR in the Educators for VR group in AltSpace and in Verbella and several other virtual reality platforms. VR desktop environments are like virtual worlds that allow you to enter a virtual world without any headset, but still feel fully immersed with the other people around you in a shared space. And those use an avatar that represents yourself. Young people today, they're growing up with a familiarity with the use of avatars because they're creating in virtual worlds like Minecraft, which is very popular for young children, and they learn a lot of computer coding. So one can enter a virtual environment as a gaming character, but in my presentation today, I'm focusing on using virtual environments as your authentic self, as a librarian or as an educator, where your avatar is your own self, not a game character. I created an avatar in 2006 called Librarian. And I use it as a professional identity to explore virtual library services and education, and what that might be in the future. Because a library, I think, can still be a place, whether physical or virtual, a community hub, as you will hear. Currently on my headset, the headset environments that I go in are what I have begun to call disposable experiences, because I might say to myself, oh, look, there's a dolphin swimming above me, it's beautiful. But then I see all of that and then pop, it's gone and it's over, and I don't need to go back and experience that again. There is a place for that, but there's also a place where on a VR desktop virtual world, there's a persistent space where you can build together an educational simulation or environment, and it's dynamic and persistent. You can return again and again and add on to it. So in virtual worlds like Second Life or OpenSim, as opposed to most VR worlds with a headset, where you need to import 3D assets from outside applications, there's a difference, and there's a purpose for and a potential for both. In the VR headset environments, you need something like Unity or Blender or Unreal Engine to build, where you don't in many virtual worlds. So there's a place for both, and you have to match it to the purpose. But let's get back to the library. If the library needs to be a community hub, it must be more than a disposable simulation that simply looks pretty. It should be a place that's persistent and dynamic, where people can meet together again and again to collaborate, have a dialogue, and think critically. So that's what the community virtual library is. It's a real library in a virtual world. It's a place where learners and anyone can come that's interested and talk with a librarian and meet others to have a dialogue and think together. And anything you can do at a physical world library, you can pretty much do in a virtual world library. But there are tons and tons of these virtual world places. How can we choose them? Well, the goal of the community virtual library is to help people navigate virtual learning spaces together. So we've organized a lot of resources to give people who are interested that can help librarians, educators, lifelong learners, help them learn how to navigate online virtual environments and become better digital citizens. I'm going to give you some links in the text chat that will show you some of the things I'm talking about, including the website, that you can look at later. So let's think about these virtual spaces. And here's the ones that I'm going to kind of talk about today, because there are many. There's no way I could cover all of them. But as I mentioned, the community virtual library is a real library, and our main branch is in the virtual world of Second Life. But we have other branches in other worlds. There are some other environments that impact libraries and education that use the same code that Second Life started with way back in 2003, such as Kitely or Avacon or OpenSim. And you can look online for information about those virtual worlds. But with these virtual worlds, they're desktop, but you must download a viewer, a client and a viewer, in order to access them. Then there's another type of virtual world where you don't have to download anything, and that's a web-based virtual world. In fact, I just went on a tour this morning of Cyber Lounge, and Cyber Lounge is just a web page, but it's in 3D. You can walk all through with other people and get that sense of presence. The community virtual library has a space in these worlds too. Recently, VR headsets have made it possible for us to meet in all these spaces, either on a headset or a desktop. But as I said, wow, so many choices. It's difficult to keep up with them. I've found the best way to keep up with all these spaces is together with your professional learning community, because you cannot be everywhere, but you can be aware of these places and together explore the best practices for utilizing them. So why Second Life? And you might be saying, what? That's still around? I thought it died years ago. No, Second Life is still alive and kicking. And now that VR is getting a lot more attention, people are exploring it again to see that there are a lot of great tools there. In fact, after 15 years of exploring virtual environments, in my opinion, there are none that provide more tools within the interface than you'll find in Second Life and the virtual worlds that are based on Second Life code. And in addition to the ability to build just about anything in any subject, from disaster simulations, medical simulations, space travel, you can do things such as a symbolic modeling of meta-literacy, which I've been working on recently, which is library work in 3D. So there's a lot of potential for these 3D environments. So we have projects also, as I mentioned, in some other virtual worlds. We have an antique pattern library located in the virtual world of Kitely. And there are digitized antique patterns and manuscripts available through the Antique Pattern Library, which is our sister library. We have a hypergrid resource library in the virtual world of Kitely, and that helps people learn how to grid hop or jump across worlds from one world to another. The one in Kitely, you can grid hop from Kitely to Avacon and to other virtual environments. I might mention that it helps to create an avatar with the same name whenever you go into a new VR virtual reality environment, so that you're recognizable and it's an authentic identity. And that's a way to develop your professional network so you can find others in the worlds that you choose to go to. And I mentioned I went into Cyber Lounge earlier today. That's a 3D world where you can create content straight to the web. And you can see here that Cyber Lounge, you do have that sense of presence in Cyber Lounge. Every year, the Community Virtual Library participates in the Dickens Project, which is a 3D simulation of Victorian times and focuses on A Christmas Carol. Well, this takes place in Second Life every year, but the research projects have actually been now put in 3D web worlds, the web-based world. So we can share our content across different virtual reality platforms. VR on the web is really expanding. And one of the links I gave you is a VR room that I created on the web. I'm not sure I really understand the purpose, because it just means that you're on a web page walking around. But I showed that as an example that all these tools are very quickly coming our way. My VR room is from Frame VR. Verbella is the company that's done Frame VR. So I've placed information there that you can look at about meta-literacy and other library topics. But the biggest advantage that I have found in virtual worlds is that sense of presence. And that sense of presence goes beyond a platform, a webinar or Canvas or Blackboard or any of those learning content management platforms, because you can really feel that you are together. Skype, Microsoft Teams, there are a lot of great tools for collaboration, but you don't actually get that sense of presence in most of those. And once you get really comfortable, the experiences do feel just as real can be. But now let's talk about headsets. When I got my headset, I was very excited to go in and feel what it feels like to be fully immersed. But I'll have to say I feel just as immersed in desktop VR in the virtual worlds as I do with the headset. I can only wear my headset for about 45 minutes. And this is AltSpace VR. The Community Virtual Library has a learning commons there. I have visited a lot of VR platforms with my colleagues. Some are here today in this session. And one of the best tools that I've found is Google Tilt Brush. And I put a little link to a little video there, because it is something where you can create. A lot of the VR environments, it's hard to create because you have to create in outside applications. But most of the VR experiences I mentioned to you are what I call disposable. And Bethany Winslow, one of my colleagues who works here at San Jose State University, she calls it the wow factor. You go in on your headset and you say, wow, this is great. And then you leave and you don't need to come back. There is a time for that, but not always for education. So librarians can be anywhere and in any virtual environment, an online space. There are a lot of them out there. So I encourage you, though, when you explore these, to think about being your authentic self. For me, since I came in as a librarian, I wanted my profession to be part of my avatar. So I ended up putting a book hat on my head. And you can see in different avatars in different worlds, I had them jump to the same place, and they kind of look alike. I didn't spend a lot of time on those. They're kind of old-looking avatars. But most VR headset spaces do not allow for avatar customization, very little. They're mostly the same look of all avatars. So that just depends on the purpose and how much time you're going to spend in the environment. But we all know that digital citizenship is really important now. So I think our online identity should be authentic, and we should take that as an important way that we're presenting ourselves. So if libraries are not only physical, and we have all these virtual environments to navigate, it just seems impossible to keep up, doesn't it? And so, because you can't go explore them all. Well, that's what the Community Virtual Library strives to help people with. And we have the CVL Educators Workshop spreadsheet. And if you go to our website, you can find, it's a spreadsheet that shows you what librarians and educators have office hours in various worlds, so they can meet you and help you navigate all of those virtual spaces. We have reference librarians on duty. And I think Lexi here probably remembers being a librarian in Second Life years ago. We still have reference services, and we have librarians on duty to help people in the virtual world. And so that's on our website as well. And we have a lot of friends of the library who volunteer, just as a public library or any library might. Our website also shares exhibits that we have in the virtual world. And we're working on a virtual world database to help people find virtual experiences that match their subject interest. So the need to help educators learn the best practices in virtual environments, especially during the COVID pandemic, that led to the beginning of the Virtual World Education Consortium. And this is a group of educators, and they met in Second Life at the beginning of this year, and many showed up. In fact, you can see it's a very crowded table. We had to design a space that's bigger so that we had much more room for more people to enter. This was the first meeting. And we hope the Community Virtual Library hosts the meetings quarterly in Second Life to help educators document their progress in virtual environments and understand the obstacles to providing library services and educational resources in this kind of an environment. The next meeting, it says on the bottom of the slide there, is going to be July 7th. It's a Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you should like to get an avatar and come into Second Life, you'd be welcome to see that. Information about the Virtual World Education Consortium is on our website. We have a virtual world group in Second Life that you can join, and a Google group that sort of works as a email listserv. If you go to Google Groups, it's called Metaverse Libraries. All one word, Metaverse Libraries is the Google group. We also have something that might be of interest if you're kind of interested in VR and you are interested in getting a headset, but you don't have to have a headset to join this. It's the VR Exploder Club. And this is actually the Community Virtual Library, a partnership with CVL and San Jose State University School of Information. VCARA, the Virtual Center for Archives and Records Administration, is part of San Jose State University. And we monthly meet in a different VR platform on the third Friday of every month, 5 o'clock Pacific time. So you can always contact me later if that sounds interesting to you. It's much better to explore virtual reality with other educators and librarians so that you have someone to sort of give feedback and critique. Librarians are always in the forefront of changing technology. And we always realize that information can come in lots of formats, not just print. And as I said, you can't go to all these platforms, but we can be aware of them and aware of matching a virtual space to a specific purpose. So I've talked about both these VR headsets and the VR desktop, and I just want to mention that the priority in the headset is the visual. That's top priority. Priority on desktop VR is more the collaborative interaction. So that's just a way of thinking about what's important, because you have to sacrifice that to get the great graphics of a headset VR. The tools, you just don't have as many tools. And you don't have quite the full graphics on a desktop. So you have to figure out which is best. I have loved this quote for years. The library and the librarian, those words are not synonymous. So a library is a place, but a librarian can be anywhere. You can be embedded. And T. Scott Plutchik says, it may be the great age of libraries is waning, but I'm here to tell you the great age of librarians is just beginning. It's up to you to decide if you want to be a part of it. I put a little bit about my book here because I'm fascinated in our changing culture, and metamodernism, which if you haven't heard of it, you might want to look that up later. I do talks on metamodernism quite a bit. It's kind of in the running of being the name for our current philosophical moment. And I'm going to give you some time for questions in text chat because we don't have a lot of time left. So I'll put my references up here. I use the term meta-literacy and meta-modernism quite a bit when I talk in virtual worlds. And you might be thinking meta. Well, it really fits. We are in a time where things are changing, and meta-modernism is a really good term for now that postmodernism has ended. And hopefully all of the irony, cynicism, and plethora of dystopian fiction. So I'm ready for questions, and I hope that Vicki will, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and Vicki can use voice. Feel free to use voice, and we will have some questions.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Dr. Hill. So we had the most recent question here is, what do you envision for the future of library virtual experiences? For example, mixed reality as a blend of VR, AR for a more visceral, immersive environment for rich storytelling and collaborative engagement.
Absolutely. There's several topics right there, because I'm talking about VR, like environments where you go into them, where a library might also really implement a lot of augmented reality. And you can also do that in a virtual world. We have a little augmented reality exhibit where you can just put your phone up to it and it will take you somewhere. So augmented reality can really be embedded anywhere. So it's kind of like there's a lot of different ways to think about it. I think a way to explain it would be, there's no need to make a virtual library that just looks pretty and just takes you to a link to read something on the web. You don't need that intermediary. Just go to the web and find the information. You need the library to have more than that. It needs to have an experience that you go into together. For instance, tomorrow I'll be leading a group to an Alice in Wonderland simulation where we're going to fall down the rabbit hole and read passages from the story, and we're going to be in the story. So there's ways to use a virtual world that you cannot possibly do in the physical world. I hope that answered the question. Is there another?
We got responses. Excellent. Thank you. And how exciting. Lots of comments here. Any other questions? Feel free to type them in the chat window.
Yes, literature is but one thing you can do. I've entered the human brain. You can go inside. Subject experts can build content that you can enter. And for a lot of learners, that's a great way to learn rather than simply reading it. We love to also embed literature so that, you know, reading is still important. It's critical, but also using these environments in new ways can be exciting if they're used purposefully. You can just email me after the presentation, and I'll put those links here again in case anybody missed them. Those are the links. My email address is valibrarian@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to invite you to the VR Exploder Club. And you can see also that our the Community Virtual Library website's there. So you can find information about where to find it if you should go in Second Life or any of the other environments that I've mentioned.
We have comments, definitely want to learn more about the VR Exploder.
Well, tomorrow night is the third Friday. We're going to engage tomorrow night. Engage VR. I don't know if you have to have a headset for that one or not. We'll see. A lot of the VR environments, you don't need a headset. You can do it on the desktop.
We also had a question, sorry, may have missed this. Any resources for elementary school families and students to navigate VR environments and experiences?
I personally would recommend Common Sense Media, and I also personally would not recommend children to use a VR headset. There's not enough research out there on their developing brains. They did one study and kindergartners could not distinguish a VR experience from a physical world experience, and we just don't know enough about it. I would say 13 and up for an actual headset. Best virtual world for kids by far is Minecraft. It starts them off, and only when it's done purposefully, you can kind of take the zombies out of it. And I know I'm supposed to close. I'm going to stop recording because my time is up, but we can still answer some questions.